So picture this. It is September 7th, 1943, and there are these two completely different events happening at the exact same time, right?
Yeah, separated by, what, thousands of miles of basically war-torn geography.
Exactly. I mean, deep in occupied Europe, in this place called Millowitz, a young Australian baker is being lowered into grave number 1 at the local Catholic cemetery.
Right, because he had just been shot dead a few days earlier.
Right. And then, at that exact same moment, literally halfway across the world, a telegraph operator is charging his grieving family 14 shillings and 6 pence.
Wow.
Yeah, they're paying to send a message to him through the Red Cross in Geneva. And the message is just to tell him that his mother had just died.
Which is just, I mean, it's incredibly tragic because he would obviously never receive it.
No, of course not. The cable is making this incredibly slow, bureaucratic journey to a man who is, well, already in the ground.
Yeah.
So, welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. We are going to explore this really terrifying, completely broken machinery of the Second World War missing persons bureaucracy.
It really is a profound overlap of events.
Yeah.
I mean, it perfectly encapsulates that whole information vacuum that defined the era, you know.
Totally.
We have this stack of primary sources today. So, military service files, Red Cross tracing records, family genealogy notes, and even some faded newspaper clippings.
And we're not just, like, reading a timeline here.
No, exactly.
Oh.
Our mission today is to piece together the short, incredibly poignant life of Mervyn Daniel Thomas.
Right.
And to do that, we have to basically navigate this massive labyrinth of paperwork.
Yeah, we're tracing his path from these dusty, sun-baked archives in Western Australia all the way across to the military records in the UK.
And then down into the chaotic battlefields of the Mediterranean, right?
Exactly, and eventually straight behind the wire of a German prisoner of war camp. Have you ever wondered what it takes to unearth a family secret that the fog of war has just buried for 80 years?
It's a huge task.
Because as you look through these sources, that really is the central mystery here. We are looking at a story of fundamental truth about how a young man died, that the official bureaucracy either just misplaced, filed away in the wrong cabinet somewhere, or intentionally withheld from his family.
Well, and to understand why a truth like that gets buried, you really have to look at the mechanics of wartime administration.
Okay, break that down for us.
So, standard personal military files, like the ones that track a soldier's promotions, pay, their daily movements, those were kept entirely separate from war crime investigation files.
Wait, really? Entirely separate?
Entirely separate. And the execution of a prisoner of war falls strictly under the war crimes category.
Right, okay.
They were processed by completely different departments. I mean, literally sitting in different buildings, serving entirely different purposes.
So the left hand has no idea what the right hand is doing.
Exactly. The regular military clerks just simply didn't have access to the grim details that the investigators held.
Yeah.
So right from the start, we are dealing with this fractured system where the family is handed one piece of paper, but the actual truth is locked in a vault halfway across the world.
It sets up this incredible tension, right, between the state's official record and a family's just desperate need for the truth.
Absolutely.
But before we get into all that heavy machinery of the military and the Red Cross, we really need to understand who this machinery was actually processing.
Right, the person behind the paperwork.
Exactly, because before he was a casualty statistic and before he was service number WX2463, Mervyn was just a boy from a town called Northampton.
Yeah, and Northampton is situated in Western Australia's northwest, which is this very rugged, very demanding part of the country.
Oh, totally.
Mervyn was actually born there on September 17th, 1918.
And looking at the genealogy records, his parents, Samuel John Thomas and Violet Rosser, they were 31 and 28 at the time of his birth, right?
That's right. And Mervyn arrived in a household that was just rapidly expanding. I mean, he was part of what would ultimately become this massive family of 11 children.
11 kids. In a regional Australian town in the 1920s, you really have to just picture the sheer volume of that household.
It would have been chaos.
Complete chaos. The noise, the chores, the constant physical labor required just to keep everyone fed and clothed. It's a completely different reality from how we structure families today.
It really is a different reality. But, you know, it also came with a very different proximity to tragedy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
When you look closely at the dates in these family notes, a really stark pattern starts to emerge. Mervyn had 4 older siblings when he was born: Phyllis, Rhoda, John, and Keith.
Okay.
But John lived for only 2 days in 1916.
Oh, wow.
And then Keith died in March 1919, right before his second birthday.
That is just heartbreaking.
It is. So by the time Mervyn was an infant, barely crawling, he was suddenly the youngest surviving child in a house that had already buried 2 babies.
I mean, that fundamentally alters the emotional landscape of a family, doesn't it?
No, completely.
They're anchoring themselves in this harsh, unforgiving environment, literally just trying to carve out a living. And Samuel and Violet are carrying this immense compounded grief.
Right.
You don't just brush off the loss of 2 infants. That kind of shared trauma, it definitely shapes the surviving siblings.
Yeah, it bonds them together tightly, but it also casts this very long, quiet shadow over the dinner table, I imagine.
Exactly.
And it builds a specific kind of resilience.
Yeah.
The family dynamic just shifted continuously as more siblings arrived over the next decade.
See, there was Reginald in 1920, right?
Yep. Then Hope, Lottie in 1922, Robert in 1923, Faith, and finally William in 1929.
So they grew into this really robust unit despite the early losses.
They did, but that foundational understanding of life's fragility, it was brutally reinforced in the year 1940.
1940 was a rough year for them.
A devastating pivot point. The genealogy records show that on May 11th of that year, Mervyn's oldest sister, Phyllis, passed away.
And she was only in her mid-20s, right? That is just gut-wrenching. I mean,
Sorry.
she would have been the anchor for the younger kids.
The big sister who helped raise the massive brood.
Yeah. Suddenly gone in the prime of her life.
But the grief didn't even stop there. The records show that just 4 days later, on May 15th, Mervyn's paternal grandmother, Maria, passed away.
She was 74, right?
Correct. So they lost 2 foundational women in this family unit within a single week.
2 funerals in a week. I'm really trying to put myself in Mervyn's shoes here.
It's hard to imagine.
He's 21 years old. The household is actively in deep mourning. The local community is probably rallying around them, bringing food, offering condolences. You know how small towns are.
Oh, absolutely.
So with so much loss already anchoring this family to the ground, what does it mean for a young man to then turn around and sign up for a global war?
It's a great question.
It feels almost counterintuitive, doesn't it? You'd think the instinct would be to stay close, to protect the family that's left.
It definitely seems counterintuitive to our modern sensibilities, but it's actually incredibly revealing about the context of 1940.
How so?
Well, the year his sister and grandmother died is the exact same year the Second World War escalated into an existential threat for the British Empire.
Right. Things were getting very real.
Exactly. So the grief of 1940 is actually inextricably linked to his decision. In regional Australia at that time, answering the call to serve wasn't just a job opportunity.
It was expected of you.
It was a profound civic and moral duty. For a young man staring at the overwhelming helplessness of personal loss at home, the military offered something else.
Structure.
Structure, purpose, and a way to actually take action in a world that probably felt completely out of control.
That makes a lot of sense. Which brings us to the actual paperwork of that decision.
Yes, the attestation form.
We have his form right here in the stack. And looking at it, it's a brilliant snapshot of his physical reality before everything changed.
What stands out to you?
Well, prior to the war, he was working as a baker and a farmhand. And those aren't light jobs. That is early morning, flour dust, heavy lifting work, combined with the brutal sun of farm labor.
He definitely knew how to work with his hands.
Exactly. He's living this very steady, very physical, ordinary life. And then on April 26, 1940, right as his family is about to descend into that terrible May, he signs the enlistment papers.
The mechanics of that enlistment process are really fascinating, too. He enlisted at Geraldton, though the records also note Northam, Western Australia, as a processing location.
And he was 21 years and 7 months old.
Right. And you have to remember, when a man volunteered back then, he didn't just sign his name and get handed a rifle. He was subjected to this rigorous medical and bureaucratic sorting process.
Yeah, I see here the medical examiner stamped his form fit for Class 1.
Exactly.
Let's break that down for the listener, because fit for Class 1 sounds like grading timber at a hardware store.
It does sound very industrial.
What did that actually mean for a recruit in 1940? What exactly were they checking for?
Well, it meant he met the really stringent physical requirements for overseas frontline infantry service.
Okay.
The military wasn't just taking everyone in 1940. They were highly selective. They checked chest expansion to ensure cardiovascular stamina.
Oh, wow.
They examined arches for flat feet because obviously an infantryman's primary mode of transport is walking.
Right. Lots and lots of walking.
And they rigorously checked dental health.
Teeth. Really?
Oh, yeah. Bad teeth meant a soldier couldn't process the hard army rations in the field.
And that leads to malnutrition.
Precisely. So being stamped Class 1 was essentially a certification that the state viewed his body as a reliable machine for the war effort.
That is such a stark way to put it. The form also demands all these personal categorizations. He nominates his father, Samuel, as his next of kin.
Standard procedure.
Right. But there's a section for religion where he originally identifies as Methodist, but then a later clerk crosses that out and notes C of E, Church of England. Why the sudden shift in a bureaucratic document? Does the Army really care about the nuanced theological differences of its recruits?
The Army cares deeply, but entirely for administrative and logistical reasons, not spiritual ones.
What do you mean?
Well, religion was stamped onto a soldier's dog tags to ensure appropriate burial rites if they were killed in action.
Oh, that makes sense.
But the bureaucracy of the front line is incredibly messy. If a clerk didn't hear a recruit clearly over the noise of an intake center, or if a specific chaplain just wasn't available in a given theater of war,
They just change it.
yeah, default categories like Church of England were frequently applied just to simplify the paperwork.
That's wild. It's a tiny detail, but it really illustrates how the military machine instantly begins smoothing out the individual edges of a person to make them fit the system.
Exactly. And the final step in that transformation is his new identity. He stops being Mervyn the Baker, and he becomes service number WX2463.
And he's posted to the 211th Australian Infantry Battalion.
That specific posting is vital context here. The 211th Battalion wasn't just another unit on a roster. No, it was the very first Western Australian battalion raised for service overseas during the Second World War.
Oh, wow. So by putting on that uniform, Mervyn was literally joining a vanguard.
He was. The massive global machinery of war had reached right into the quiet country towns of the Northwest, scooped up the bakers, the farmhands, the bank clerks, and thrust them into this international mechanized conflict.
They were the local boys transformed into the Australian Imperial Force.
Exactly.
So they train, they equip, and then they ship out. The sources show they sailed out of Fremantle in June 1940, heading straight for the Middle East.
Right.
But here's where we find a detail in the records that absolutely stops you in your tracks. And honestly, I love it because it's just so fiercely human.
Oh, the AWOL incident.
Yes. In early 1941, the battalion is stationed in Palestine. They are training, waiting for the real war to start. And Mervyn's official conduct record gets this small, typed entry. He goes AWOL.
Absent without leave.
Absent without leave. From 2,200 hours on March 28th to 2,300 hours on March 29th. One single night.
One night out.
He is caught, fined £1, and docked 2 days' pay.
You know, in the grand sweep of military history, a 24-hour unauthorized absence means absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
It doesn't affect a campaign. It barely registers to the commanding officer. But from a biographical standpoint, it is a magnificent detail.
I completely agree. It's the ultimate reality check against this stoic myth of the perfect soldier, you know?
Yeah.
It reminds you that behind WX2463 was literally just a 22-year-old bloke.
Right. He's in a foreign country, surrounded by new sights, new sounds, new temptations.
Maybe he snuck out to a local bazaar, or maybe he found a pub, or maybe he just wanted 24 hours where no one was barking orders at him.
Exactly. It is a brilliant flash of youthful rebellion.
It's a tiny assertion of personal agency before the absolute chaos of combat just swallows him whole.
And that window of agency closed incredibly fast.
Yeah, it did.
Because that brief night in Palestine is essentially the last moment of freedom he would experience for years. Shortly after that entry, the bureaucratic tracking shifts from training exercises to active combat.
The 211th Battalion was plunged headfirst into the Mediterranean theater.
Right. They go into action against the Italians in Libya first, which was brutal enough.
But then the real meat grinder starts when they are deployed to Greece in April 1941.
The Mediterranean campaign in the spring of 1941 was an absolute disaster for the Allied forces.
Just a complete mess.
They were under-equipped, they lacked adequate air cover, and they were facing this highly mechanized, fast-moving German offensive.
Mervyn was thrown into the desperate rearguard actions in Greece.
And when that position inevitably collapsed, the battalion was evacuated to the islands of Crete.
And Crete was where the conventional rules of warfare were basically rewritten, right?
Completely. The Germans launched an unprecedented airborne invasion, just dropping thousands of paratroopers onto the island. The fighting was vicious, it was close quarters, and completely chaotic.
The sources show that the cohesion of the 211th Battalion was fundamentally shattered. Whole companies were cut off, surrounded, and just overrun.
And during this chaos, Mervyn is wounded in his right knee.
Now, a knee wound for an infantryman in a rapidly collapsing defensive line, that is catastrophic.
It's a worst-case scenario. You cannot march, you cannot retreat to the evacuation beaches, and you cannot evade capture.
You become entirely stationary in a very fluid-moving battle.
Exactly. And the military records immediately reflect this sudden darkness. The tidy clerical entries tracking his unit's movements just vanish.
Right. Instead, the bureaucracy resorts to the stark, terrifying shorthand of the casualty branch.
Looking at the sequence of these file updates is chilling.
It really is. First, there's just a single word typed next to his name. Missing.
No context, no location.
Nothing. Then, weeks later, an update arrives through intelligence or Red Cross channels. Believed POW.
And finally, it solidifies into a hard, undeniable fact. Confirmed POW.
The file notes he had a stint at the prisoner of war hospital in Kokinia, near Athens, to treat that knee wound.
The process of moving from missing to confirmed POW is a massive administrative undertaking on its own.
I can imagine.
It required the German military to process thousands of captured men, register their names, and hand those lists over to the International Committee of the Red Cross in Geneva.
Who then had to telegraph the Allied nations, who then updated their internal files.
That's a slow, agonizing pipeline of information.
I really want to focus on the psychological impact of that transition.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
You go from being a baker to a cohesive unit of West Australians fighting shoulder to shoulder with your mates to suddenly lying on the ground with a blown-out knee.
Right.
The battle moves on without you. Strange men speaking a language you don't understand disarm you, and you are pushed into the enemy's logistical machine. How does a human mind navigate that sudden, absolute loss of power?
It is arguably one of the most profound psychological shocks a person can endure. In a frontline military unit, despite the strict hierarchy, you still possess agency. You have your weapon, your assigned objective, your comrades.
You have a job to do.
Exactly. But when you are captured, that agency is surgically removed. You're no longer a combatant. You're reduced to a logistical problem for the enemy.
Wow.
You become an object to be processed, counted, fed on minimal rations, and contained. For a young man raised in the vast open spaces of the Australian outback, the sudden physical confinement behind barbed wire, it's unimaginable.
Entirely at the mercy of a hostile foreign power.
Right. It requires a radical, immediate internal recalibration just to survive the initial shock.
And his physical movement mirrors that total loss of agency. He doesn't stay in the Mediterranean, where at least the climate is somewhat familiar.
No, the German war machine processes him and ships him deep into the dark heart of occupied Europe.
He is put on a train, and we know those train journeys were horrific men packed into cattle cars with a single bucket for days.
Yeah, brutal conditions.
And they move him far north into what is now Poland to a massive German camp called Stalag VIII-B at Lamsdorf.
And the arrival at Lamsdorf marks another bureaucratic erasure of his identity. He is stripped of his Australian service number, WX2463.
And the German authorities issue him a new identity.
Prisoner number 23297. And he would remain trapped in that specific administrative system for over 2.5 years.
2.5 years is an eternity in those conditions. Now, when most people hear the word Stalag, they picture the movies, right?
Oh, yeah, like The Great Escape.
Exactly. One big, dusty compound with guard towers where thousands of men sit around in barracks all day plotting tunnel escapes. But Stalag VIII-B wasn't just a single, static, fenced-in area, was it?
No, the cinematic portrayal is very misleading. To understand what Mervyn actually endured, we have to look at how the German POW system functioned economically.
Okay.
Stalag is an abbreviation for Stammlager, which translates to main camp. Stalag VIII-B at Lamsdorf was colossal, holding tens of thousands of men, but it functioned primarily as a massive administrative hub.
Almost like a corporate headquarters.
Yes, exactly. The grueling daily reality for the vast majority of the prisoners was out in the field, in what the Germans called Arbeitskommandos, or work parties.
Wait, hold on. I need to challenge this because it feels like a glaring contradiction.
Sure.
I thought the Geneva Convention, specifically the 1929 Convention regarding prisoners of war, which Germany signed, explicitly banned making captured soldiers work for the enemy's war effort.
It did.
So how are the Germans getting away with putting an Australian soldier into forced labor?
It's an excellent question, and it exposes the deliberate loopholes the German state exploited.
Okay, lay it on me.
The 1929 Geneva Convention did allow for the labor of non-commissioned prisoners of war, provided the work was not directly related to military operations.
Meaning what?
Meaning you couldn't force a POW to manufacture bullets or dig frontline trenches.
Oh, I see.
Furthermore, the work was supposed to be compensated, and the conditions were supposed to mirror those of local civilian workers.
But I'm guessing the Germans bent those rules until they broke.
Exactly. They completely blurred the lines. By 1941 and 1942, the German war economy was facing a catastrophic labor shortage.
Because millions of their own men had been drafted for the invasion of the Soviet Union.
Right. The domestic economy was starving for manpower. So they utilized the massive influx of Allied POWs to fill the gaps in agriculture, forestry, mining, and heavy industry.
I mean, that's incredibly cynical.
Very. While a prisoner might be officially registered on paper at the Lamsdorf headquarters, physically, they could be dispersed to a work camp hundreds of kilometers away in Czechoslovakia or southern Poland, digging coal or crushing rocks.
And the Germans argued this was just civilian infrastructure.
Exactly. But of course, coal powers the trains that move the tanks.
Right. So it's a hub-and-spoke model. The Stalag is the hub where the Red Cross might visit and see somewhat acceptable conditions, but the Arbeitskommandos are the isolated spokes where the real, unmonitored brutality happens.
You hit the nail on the head.
Put yourself in his boots for a second. You are thousands of miles from the dry heat of Western Australia. You are shivering through brutal European winters.
With a lingering knee injury, remember?
With a bad knee. And you are basically forced into hard labor day in and day out for the very army that shot at you, contributing to the economy of the regime you enlisted to destroy.
The isolation of those work parties is the critical factor in Mervyn's story. In the main camp at Lamsdorf, there was a dense, complex prisoner hierarchy.
There was safety in numbers.
Yes. There were doctors, covert communication networks, and a psychological sense of collective protection provided by the sheer mass of Allied soldiers.
But out in an Arbeitskommando?
Out there, a prisoner was profoundly vulnerable. A work party might consist of 50 or 100 men housed in a makeshift barn or a small compound near a mine.
So they were completely cut off.
They were exposed to harsher weather, fewer rations, and the immediate, often violent whims of the local guards or civilian foremen.
Which means the oversight was basically zero.
Essentially non-existent.
Which sets the stage for the tragic final act of his life. We move to September 1943. Mervyn is out on one of these work parties in the Sosnowiec district.
Yes. And the sources vary slightly on the exact geography, noting it as either Czechoslovakia or southern Poland.
Why the confusion?
Because the wartime borders in that region had been completely erased and redrawn by the German occupation. The administrative borders were fluid, but the reality on the ground was a harsh industrial mining and agricultural region. And it is here, in this deeply isolated setting, that the paper trail and the family memory finally collide.
According to the official records, Mervyn died on September 2nd or 3rd, 1943. He was 24 years old.
Though it's worth noting some later memorial stones incorrectly list him as 25 due to clerical errors.
This collision between official documentation and oral history is definitely the most compelling part of these sources. The family lore, which was passed down through the decades by his surviving cousins and siblings, was very specific.
What did the family say?
They said Mervyn refused a direct order while on a work party, and a guard shot him dead. That was the story the family held on to. But when you look at the Australian War Memorial Database, they list his cause of death with a single, incredibly chilling word: execution.
And if you dig deeper into the segregated British casualty registers, those files that weren't shared with the general military clerks, you find an agonizingly plain, bureaucratic shorthand.
What does it say?
It states, shot dead 2 Sep 43 whilst escaping at Sosnowiec.
That completely changes the context. But he didn't make this desperate run alone, did he? There's another name in the file.
He did not act alone. And this is where archival research truly resurrects the final moments of his life. The exact same German report that logs Mervyn's death also names the man who was buried right beside him.
Who was it?
He was a British soldier named Horace Joseph Kipping. He was prisoner number 15413, serving with the Oxford and Bucks Light Infantry.
Okay.
Kipping's entry in the British Casualty Register is virtually identical to Mervyn's. Shot dead 2 Sep 43 whilst escaping.
Wow.
The records confirm they were buried side by side in graves 1 and 2 at the Millowitz Catholic Cemetery just a few days later on September 7th.
2 prisoners from completely opposite sides of the world, bonded by captivity, making a desperate break for freedom on the exact same day, dying on the exact same day.
It's incredibly powerful.
Now, the expert who authored the article in our source material titled One Order Too Many does a brilliant job of reconciling the family's oral history with this official military record.
Yes, they do.
At first glance, refusing an order and escaping sound like two completely different events. How do we synthesize them?
It is a seamless synthesis when you understand the daily mechanics and lethal reality of a POW camp.
Okay, explain that.
The primary standing order given to every single prisoner of war, enforced by the barrel of a rifle every second of the day, is to stay put.
Right.
Escaping is the ultimate refusal of that standing order. If Mervyn and Horace made a run for the perimeter wire, or if they slipped away from a mining detail into the woods, and a German guard leveled his weapon and shouted, "Halt!"
Choosing to keep running is disobeying a direct order in the very last seconds of your life.
Exactly. The family's generational memory of refusing an order and being shot is entirely consistent with the bureaucratic designation of being shot whilst escaping.
It's a tragic, heroic moment, a final assertion of the agency he lost 2.5 years prior in Crete.
It really is.
But when we zoom out and look at the broader timeline, the human tragedy of this moment is just staggering, because back in the harsh sunlight of Western Australia, an entirely separate tragedy had just unfolded.
Yes.
Mervyn's mother, Violet, passed away on August 18, 1943. That is just 2 weeks before Mervyn made his run for the wire.
The timing creates a devastating bureaucratic irony. This brings us back to the image we started with.
Right.
On September 7th, the exact day the German guards were lowering Mervyn's body into grave number 1 at the Mellowet Cemetery, the International Red Cross processed a cable to Geneva.
And the receipt shows it cost 14 shillings and 6 pence.
Exactly. Its singular purpose was to inform Mervyn, the prisoner of war, that his mother had died.
It breaks your heart entirely. We have a mother who closes her eyes for the last time, not knowing if she will ever see her son again, terrified of the conditions he is living in.
Yeah.
And we have a son who makes a desperate, fatal sprint for freedom, entirely unaware that the mother he is almost certainly dreaming of returning to has just passed away.
It's just devastating.
The communication cable was making its slow, methodical journey across continents to a man who was already dead.
It perfectly illustrates the profound, inescapable information vacuum of the Second World War. Time and distance were absolute barriers.
Families and soldiers were living in completely disparate realities, weren't they?
Separated by months of bureaucratic processing, censorship boards, and logistical bottlenecks, a message had to travel from a local post office in Australia to a central military hub, to the neutral Red Cross in Switzerland, to a German censor, to the Stalag headquarters, and finally to the isolated work camp.
And by the time reality caught up with the paperwork, the facts on the ground had irreparably changed. Let's follow that agonizing delay back to Western Australia, to the siblings left behind. News of Mervyn's death finally reaches his older sister, Rhoda.
She was listed in the papers as Mrs. J.O. Davies, right?
Yes, living in the small farming town of Dangan. And the news doesn't arrive until mid-October 1943. It took over a month for the telegram to find the family.
And when the family receives that news, they immediately engage in the public rituals of mourning. They publish bereavement notices in local newspapers, the West Australian, the York Chronicle, the York Leader.
Those notices are incredible primary sources because they paint a vivid picture of a family deeply, actively entrenched in the war effort.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't a family watching from the sidelines.
No, his younger brothers, Reg and Rob, were both actively serving in the military. His sister Lottie had enlisted in the Women's Auxiliary Australian Air Force the previous year in 1942.
And one of the newspaper notices submitted by his brothers reads, simply and powerfully, "We'll carry on, brother."
Think about the emotional weight of receiving that telegram. You tear open the envelope, and it simply says, "Your brother is dead." But it doesn't say how.
No context at all.
The Red Cross files we have explicitly note, and this is underlined twice in the archives, that the next of kin were not advised of the cause of death.
Right. They were only told he died on September 23rd, which was a completely incorrect date generated somewhere along the official channels.
How on earth do you process that? Your other siblings are currently in uniform, actively fighting the very machine that just killed your brother. Your mother just died 2 months ago, and now the state hands you a telegram with a wrong date and absolutely zero context.
It is the ultimate cruelty of the wartime bureaucracy. They demanded total sacrifice from this family, and in return, they handed them a death with no reason attached.
Just a piece of paper.
The state machinery, hampered by its own segregated files and the chaos of the Eastern Front, basically failed to give them the truth. And this is exactly why the family lore became so vitally important.
Because the official channels provided nothing but a void.
Exactly. The family had to preserve the truth themselves. They held on to the story that he was shot for refusing an order, protecting it, and keeping it alive strictly through oral history for decades.
And it wasn't until modern archival access allowed researchers to pull the segregated British war crime files and the German burial registers that the family's stubbornly held truth was finally, undeniably proven right.
It is an incredible testament to the power of family memory against the weight of a filing cabinet.
It really is. And to add insult to injury regarding the official record, we found a German clerical error on his burial documentation that listed his Australian hometown as Co instead of Q.
Ah, yes, the typo.
A typo made by an exhausted enemy clerk 80 years ago, just sitting there in the official historical record like a permanent scar. It really shows how fragile the official truth is.
That typo is a perfect microcosm of the systemic fragility we've been discussing. You have to consider the incredible difficulty of World War II clerking.
Yeah, I guess so.
You have a German administrative officer working in a second language, trying to phonetically decipher handwritten, hastily scribbled notes passed up from a guard at a rural work camp while processing millions of casualties.
Right. A U looks like an O, and suddenly the geography of a man's life is permanently altered in the archives.
The official record is only as reliable as the most tired clerk in the chain. That is why the convergence of the family's oral history with the archival documentation is so powerful. The family corrects the record.
Which brings us to the long memory. Commemoration. How does a nation process a loss like this? Mervyn earned 5 medals for his service, including the Africa Star for those hard, early desert campaigns before his capture.
And when the Army finally processed his entitlements after the war, they didn't hold a ceremony.
No. His card was just stamped with the word deceased in massive block letters, and the medals were mailed to his family. Just a handful of bright metal in a cardboard box standing in for a 24-year-old baker.
The post-war commemoration process is both monumental and deeply personal. In 1948, as Europe stabilized, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission began the massive undertaking of consolidating battlefield burials.
So they moved him?
Yes. Mervyn's remains were exhumed from that initial lonely grave at Mellowitz and relocated to the meticulously maintained Commonwealth War Cemetery at Kraków-Rakowicki in Poland.
He rests in grave 2B3.
The commission allowed families to choose a short inscription for the headstone, and the Thomas family chose. His duty, fearlessly and nobly done, ever remembered.
And back home in Australia, the commemoration takes a different form. His name is projected onto the exterior of the Hall of Memory at the Australian War Memorial on specific dates throughout the year.
He is also permanently listed on the Ballarat POW Memorial.
The institutions do their best to honor the sacrifice. I have to ask you, though, looking at all these systems and structures, does a physical memorial, a name carved into a white stone in Poland, or a beam of light projected onto a wall in Canberra, ever truly fill the void left by a life cut off at 24?
No. It can never fill a void, nor is it meant to.
Right.
A memorial is not designed to replace the person. It is designed to agitate the living. It demands that we do not forget the cost of the peace we inherit.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Mervyn's grave in Poland is a fixed geographic point for his family's history, but he also represents something much larger. He stands in for all those young men from small country towns, the bakers, the farmhands, the clerks, whose sacrifices left them permanently embedded in European soil.
The memorial gives the surviving family a physical location to direct their grief, a place where the state formally acknowledges their loss.
But the void at the dinner table remains permanently empty.
It really is a profound journey we've been on today. We started with a bustling, loving family in the sun-baked northwest of Australia, navigating the harsh realities of infant loss.
We followed a young man who answered the call in the wake of immense family grief.
We traced his steps through the chaos of Greece and the airborne assault on Crete, watched his identity get stripped away as he entered the brutal hub-and-spoke economy of the German work camps,
and witnessed his desperate, fatal final run for freedom.
And we ended with a family who, despite an overwhelming, compounding grief, simply promised to carry on.
And tracing that path really highlights the immense, irreplaceable value of these primary records.
Absolutely.
Because for every Mervyn whose family diligently passed down his story and eventually partnered with researchers to seek out the truth, there are thousands of files sitting in archives right now.
Segregated, misfiled, or misunderstood.
Exactly. They are holding secrets, holding the final moments of young lives, just waiting for someone to care enough to pull them from the box and read them.
That is the perfect thought to end on today. Because we rely so heavily on official documents, textbooks, and institutional databases to tell us the truth of our history.
We assume the typed paper is infallible.
But as Mervyn's story proves, sometimes the official documents get the date wrong. They get the hometown wrong. And sometimes, due to the rigid silos of bureaucracy, they actively hide the actual cause of death from the people who deserve to know it most.
It makes you wonder.
It really does. How much of what we accept as the solid, undeniable historical record is actually just a clerical error, waiting patiently to be corrected by the stubborn, enduring memory of a grieving family?
It is a vital question and a reminder to always question the source of the history we consume.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope that the next time you see a faded black and white photograph of a soldier or a name carved into a local memorial, you take a second to look past the uniform and wonder about the colors, the truths, the clerical errors, and the human heartbeat hidden just beneath the surface.